Hello, I'm Horace Douty in Lexington, Virginia, and each week I bring you a local history lesson by way of YouTube. I encourage you to subscribe to Horace Douty, D-O-U-T-Y, YouTube. And if you enjoy these videos, then share them with your family and friends. I appreciate that. Today, I want to talk about a mountain that stands between the valley and the Alleghenies in western Rockbridge County, just west of Lexington. The mountain is called Green Hill, and it is a high peak. It's almost 3,000 feet altitude. John and Nancy Green were the pioneers who settled here in Collierstown sometime in the early 1800s. And they built a two-story log home, which is behind me, and it was a little bit larger than what was customary at that time. With axe and plow and muscle power, they carved out their productive homestead. When their long lives ended in 1892, they were laid to rest right in front of the cabin, which is not in this picture, but is on the edge of the woods just in front of the cabin. 100 years later, I own that little graveyard, which was not visible and certainly not mentioned in the title search. The discovery of that little graveyard came as a complete surprise to me. In 1956, I had come to the Collierstown Presbyterian Church as supply preacher, my last year of seminary, and upon graduation, the church called me as pastor. And it was there I received the rites of ordination and installation. The people were unforgettable in their affection and their patience, doing their best to turn their energetic young preacher into a pastor. It was a wonderful time for me. I loved the unsurpassed mountain beauty. Although I moved to a city church in 1961, every autumn brought me back to Rockbridge, where I had learned to hunt wild turkeys. Sometime during the 1980s, my son Dale and I bought a small tract of forest on Black's Creek where we could camp and hunt. And later on, we were able to add additional acreage that included this log house. We promptly restored it as our hunting lodge, and at the time I was totally unaware of its historic significance. I only knew that this cabin behind me, was pure luxury. After sleeping on the ground and camping in snow and wind and rain, sitting before the blazing fire in that cabin, with wintry sleet falling outside, Dale spoke of discovering what he thought was a tombstone out there in the thicket. My curiosity was aroused. The next day, I crawled through brush on hands and knees searching, and finally found a number of grave markers with inscriptions. And that information stirred my interest in local history that continues to this day. And from court records, I found that Green Hill Mountain was named for John and Nancy Green. Now they were lying forgotten in the jungle. It struck me as sad, but I took no immediate action to improve their situation. For several years, we enjoyed the hikes and the hunts on our land, none of which adjoined the nearby Washington National Forest. And across the fence was a large, attractive parcel that had everything: road frontage, streams, open land, timber, views, and wildlife. It was bounded by huge national forests. Furthermore, John and Nancy had originally owned all the connecting properties. Subdividing had happened before they died in 1892, and through a local realtor, I learned that a man in Germany currently owned this beautiful piece of ground. And when I got in touch with him, the German said flatly, This is my dream of perfect land. I will never consider letting it go. And my hope of putting John and Nancy's farm back together seemed to be an impossible dream. My attention turned to the graveyard, which I did own. Restoring it would be a challenge, but I was determined. I worked at the project for months whenever I had time to make the 200-mile round trip from my home to this property. And I sensed that the dozen or more people who lay in the plot were quietly encouraging my use of muscles and machine to clear the heavy canopy and allow daylight. And by late October, the project was finished. I wanted Ellen, my wife, to see the transformation, so we drove to Lexington, 100 miles, on Friday evening, checked in at the hotel, and made appointments with my realtor friend for the next day. He was prepared to help us find a residence in Lexington in which to live. The next morning was gorgeous, crisp, beautiful sunshine, breathtaking swath of autumn color across the landscape. We would have time to visit Green Hill before the appointment. And we drove up Green Lane to our property, and after a touching visit at the graveyard with John and Nancy, I wanted to see the edge of the property and the land that was not for sale. And Ellen, I remember she said, I really regret that this lovely place cannot be bought. And my rejoinder was that the price would be too high anyway. However, after we met with the realtor and looked at some houses, I brought up the subject once again, saying to the agent, if I send that German a sizable check, isn't there a chance that he might agree to allow me first refusal in the event of a sale? And the realtor said it might be something to try, but probably would not bear fruit for at least another quarter century. But I was willing. After lunch, I would provide a check. And while we were having lunch, Ellen and I, my cell phone rang, and it was our realtor, and he said, you are not going to believe this. That property, owned by the German, is going to be for sale, and in 1 hour, we are going to list it. Well, the asking price was exactly half of what I thought it should be. So, we immediately signed the contract. Other buyers signed the same day because it's a very popular property, but ours were first, and we got the property even though others offered much more. We were first, and we were accepted. We began to wonder how such good fortune had come our way. What spirit had brought us to Lexington that particular day? What if a different agency had been allowed to list the property? What caused me to inquire at exactly the right moment and even commit to an unpromising option? Why did it happen? Well, the truth slowly dawned on me. John and Nancy out there in the graveyard had helped our cause in appreciation for my labor at their gravesite. Skeptical people smiled at that notion, even though the New Testament declares with great authority that the ones who have gone before us are watching from the sidelines, cheering us on in the first chapter, or chapter 11 of Hebrews. Today, as you drive up Virginia Road 656, which is Green Lane, you are entering John and Nancy's home place. It's consolidated once again. The modest road ends at a scenic hilltop on the mountain, and from there you can view the powerful north face of Green Hill and the twin peaks of House Mountain and the sweeping Allegheny Range. Ellen and I named all this acreage Green's Gift. That is your history lesson for today.